Welcome to all inspiring chefs, cooks, and everything in between alike. This is Griever, your guys' host as always. This is my bar, the place I'm always at, and this is Shokugeki no Soma, chapter 309. Let's get cooking because this was an actual good chapter. I like this chapter. I won't say I love it because it's hard to love a chapter in the middle of a bad arc. But if it was on its own, I can almost use the other L word. Lesbians, of course. But this chapter, actually, now people will complain about what happens in this chapter as something tacked on, something added on in the end, something that's kind of like it's not good writing. You know, I can forgive it because the only thing that's really missing was just a little more foreshadowing. And people are also reading the wrong thing into it. But let's get into the chapter, and I'll talk about this. So, beginning of the chapter leaves off at the end. Everyone's still pumping up Asami. He's still, Saiba. He's still, cross knives is amazing. This dish is amazing. The grand scale, what is it called? Giving, gifting, stripping, all that stuff. And shout outs to the guy in the first page. Good for you, man. He knows what he's after. I mean, I'd be more shocked, it'd be more unrealistic, forgetting the fact that the whole realism of stripping people with food, it'd be even more wild and unrealistic if guys weren't staring. I'm just saying. Shout out to you, man, because you're following your base desires. Good for you. And everyone's saying, like, this is a mass scale right now. Like, this is, I've never seen this. Apparently it's happened before, according to the old gentleman in the last chapter, but he's never had it on this scale. Susanamon confirms this, that not even he. And we've never seen Susanamon's cooking, I don't believe. So I'm assuming his cooking is incredible. I'm assuming Azami does have amazing levels of cooking, but apparently it's still not enough. It was not enough to save his, daughter. And in retrospect, apparently, eventually, it won't be enough to save Arena, according to this chapter. Now, this is where, everyone's saying, like, look, even your mother is acknowledging, we see Mana, she's not lying on the floor, she ate the bite, and she did the stuff. And we see, and he's like, I can't be beat sort of idea. Ha, 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 ha. And Arena's saying the same thing, like she's thinking to herself, well, it's true, like, no matter what happened in the past, when I used to give dishes to my grandfather's stuff at the age of 4, he'd even, like, lose one layer of clothing, sort of idea. And it was like, oh, wow, that's really impressive. She's only 4, that's incredible. She'd give it to her mother, and her mother was a nice person. And here's one problem with the chapter. Well, not the chapter, but the characterization is that she gives this dish to her mother, and her mother will taste it and go, it's a very good dish, Arena, good for you. But she never said, I love this dish, this dish is delicious. She never, see, they've harped, and this is okay, they harped on the term delicious ever since the beginning. Arena and Soma. Soma will not rest until Arena says this, what he cooked was delicious. Same thing here. They're very harping on that particular word. No matter what you say about someone's cooking your dish, if they don't say the word delicious, it's not good enough for them. That's a key word in this series. And I'm okay with that because it's been a constant, right? My only issue here with this flashback scene of Arena remembering this is Mana's characterization. Azami's is okay, which we'll talk about. And spoilers, Azami's back in the chapter. Okay, cool. And I actually like him more now as a result of this chapter, which is why I think it's a good chapter. But Mana, how do you go from a caring mother, clearly, and willing to put on a brave face and be like, yeah, I mean, it tastes good, but to her, it's just normal. It doesn't taste bad, but it doesn't taste good. It's just average, right? And how do you go from that loving mother thing to the point where it's like, okay, so I don't like food anymore, so I end up in despair, which is fine. We've seen what despair and depression can do to people, but the fact that she ended up this negative toward her own child, like, you don't go from a caring, and apparently according to other flashbacks, she was very much like Arena in her youth. You don't go from that character, but then again, Arena's character has literally been flipped on its head like 20 times in the last 10 chapters, so maybe not the best comparison to use, but I don't believe it. I can't believe that at age 4, she was a caring mother, and now she literally thinks her daughter's basically not worth even talking to or mentioning, and giving her harsh challenges because she thinks it's fun, because she's sadistic. You don't go from A to B like that. It does. I just don't see it. To me, it's not good, right? Even if someone does in your own life and history and stuff, and you can justify it, it doesn't mean it's a good way. It's not good characterization. To me, that's a very exceptional case, and it doesn't build anything, right? For me, anyways. Anyways, enough about Mana. We're here to talk about Azami, because we see that once Arena's doing her depression thing again, Alice and Hisako show up, and they're like, oh, well, we were on a mission, blah, 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 to bring back Azami, according to Joshiro and Suzanuma, and they're like, go get Azami. So Azami shows up, and the hairstyle is hilarious. It really is, because he looks kind of wrecked, like a dude who was, remember he was so well put together and so evil-eyed. Now he's just solemn, and you can tell, he's been through the ringer sort of idea, and he's washed up. Washed up is the best term to use for his look. It's not that he's unkept, he's washed up, he's just not himself, right? And remember, none of this forgives what he did, but at least it's given a reason. Now, basically, instead of going page by page, I'm just going to explain what happens here. Azami pretty much, and we saw this, remember, we saw this in previous volumes with Azami feature. Of course, had to feature him this week. We go through the flashbacks, and we saw that he did say, I hated cooking, pretty much. I lost my passion for cooking. I was empty. Nothing I did felt good anymore ever since Joshiro left and lost to the storm. And we can talk about the storm a little bit after this. But he lost to the storm, and Azami couldn't find his passion again. It wasn't until he had a very Soma meets Arena encounter with Mana that he started to get his passion back. He felt like he had found someone else worthy, similar to Joshiro, someone he could look up to in a sense. Maybe not look up to necessarily, but a way, once again, she's a pivotal. She had the God tongue. She was doing the same thing in Arena to lead the gourmet world, the pressure on her shoulders to weather the harshest point of the storm, the wasteland that is cooking, the gourmet world. And he looked at that as a way to get his passion for cooking back again, to try new things, to get further. And at this time, he was still cooking in a method similar to Joshiro, and Soma did, by the looks of this, clearly, because he had to go think outside the box to please Mana. And eventually, he slowly did a little bit here, there, and everywhere, but afterwards, of course, we don't really see what happened, how they started a relationship, but by the time Arena, was 4 or 5 or whatever, she had finally fallen. We see the despair, and we see Azami, a caring husband, like Mana. So clearly they did live together as a family for a time. And unfortunately, he even says, he goes, my abilities weren't enough. The pace of the God tongue in the storm is too fast. I couldn't keep up with my abilities alone. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, okay, eventually the chains will break. It's just how long you can hold on sort of idea. And that's all he was doing. Azami probably delayed the despair that the God tongue brought by bringing up all these things and trying to help. But eventually the pacing got ahead of him. When you're kind of neck and neck a lot of the time, and when you're second place, in a race, you're still a worthy rival. Sometimes you're first, most of the times you're second, but you're still there. But eventually, as time goes on, you're not really ever hitting first anymore. You're hitting seconds mostly, and thirds even sometimes. Then you're slowly going down and down. The problem with the God tongue is it's going first. It's not only just always getting first, it's beating its own time again and again and again. It does the track in 10 seconds, then 9.5, then 9, then 8.5, and it continuously beats its own record to the point that even if Azami's in second place is miles apart. It's not a neck-and-neck match anymore. And unfortunately, that's what happened. And at this point, now he's gone through 2 people that he saw swallowed up by the storm. His loving wife at this point, the one who saved him out of his own despair, in a sense, when it happened to Joshiro, his senpai. But now he, his mentor and the person he looked up to in his youth and his wife have now both been swallowed up by this same storm. And he blamed the gourmet world. He blamed the current status of the cooking world for both of them. And he knew that eventually, with Arena having the god tongue, this could happen to her. And so Azami's whole thing was to prevent this from ever happening to Arena. He even admits, he goes, she's going to have a very strict education, is what he called it. And I mean, he could have been better about it. Of course, we saw what the traumatization of what he did, and he was like, enough, right? So Susanamon is the one explaining most of this. And so he realized, so that's probably why he didn't stop Azami sooner, but with Arena and stuff. But here, it's just, he went total, we saw this is where he basically first got his mask, this devil face sort of idea, this rotting decay thing, similar to a Lucifer thing from the show Lucifer, now on Netflix. He kind of got that whole persona during this time after he realized there's still a third person I have to save, but my methods won't work. I don't have the skill as a chef to hold back the power of the storm. So his idea was to revolutionize the cooking world. Have no bad dishes. If there's no bad dishes, in his mind, I mean, it really, in the end of the day, not much of a solution, but at the end of the day, if every dish was of equal value, if every dish tasted good, and there was no bad dishes, there would be nothing left. The storm would almost subside in a sense, or it would get easier. There would be no more pursuit if the entire cooking world never evolved anymore. If the cooking world finally went to a standstill, is the way I read this, and there was never a new dish anymore. There was never a new technique discovered. There was never a new ingredient. They always made the same things. Boring, yes. Standstill, no growth, no experience, no new evolutions, but it could potentially, there would be then no need for the storm. No one would have to take one more step further into the storm because this is the end. They reached their finish line. There is no other race. There is not a second finish line. And I get the reasoning. I hope I explained that well, guys, because I feel like it's rushed here in the chapter, though they give it a whole chapter's worth of exposition and stuff. It's a little rushed here, but I feel like this is a great explanation. It's a good conclusion. It's a good reasoning to reach. You're not good enough. You're not, the Wayne Gretzky of hockey. You can't. You just can't. You can't beat that record. You can't go further than that. You can't do this, right? So, what do? You want to do something, but your power isn't enough. So what do? You have to find an alternate means. And that's what Azami did, and it's a worthy goal to try. He didn't, at this point, he almost gave up on Joshiro, and he gave up on Mana. But by doing this, he was trying to prevent it from happening to Arena, because Mana, it had already happened. Fixing the gourmet world now wouldn't fix her. She was already in the storm. It already beat her. It already beat Joshiro in this sense. So the storm had already taken them. But before Arena entered too far into the storm, he could stop the storm, basically, and call for sunny days. The forecast for today is, no more storm. The storm is finally over, and we have decent weather. We have a mild weather set coming through here on the jet stream, That's basically what he was trying to do, a prevention method. Change the forecast. Have no storm. And that's the way I read it, guys. What do you guys think? I really like this. It gives Azami's whole plan way more meaning, and the only thing missing is a tiny bit of foreshadowing about this in the central arc. Just a tiny bit of foreshadowing, a line from Susanamon, something left ambiguous near the end, or between the conversation of Susanamon, Joshiro, and Azami, something could be said. It didn't have to be relevant to the central arc plot, but something could have been said. Maybe before Azami left, at the end of the Regiment du Cuisine, he said, I could acknowledge this, but never mind. So just something to tip us off that there is something more to this story. Just one more piece. That's the only thing I feel like that's missing from this characterization, because it's great characterization. And one thing I also want to point out, that people are complaining that it's all about Mana now, but it was all about Joshiro. Everything starts and ends with Joshiro. I'm like, yes, but it was the same case. That's what I feel like a lot of people who are reading this don't get it. Is that it's not really, it is tacked on here, but it makes sense. It didn't really, I would have liked some foreshadowing, but it still makes sense. It doesn't need to be mentioned. it started with Joshiro. And it's now the exact same problem times 2. Except this time it happened to his wife. And he tried to prevent this from happening to Arena. But this is one of those whole placebo effect things. If you tell people this is why you're doing it, people would say it's too personal, it's a selfish reason, you're not trying to actually change the world, you're just trying to save your own daughter. If Arena found out, she would rebel against it. There is a multitude of negatives or cons to revealing this side of the plan to anyone. Though Suzanama neither was told about it or figured it out, what Azami was trying to do. And clearly Joshiro did as well. And probably Gi. They probably all knew or figured it out at some point. This is something that it makes a lot of sense to me, guys. I don't know about you guys, but I really love this chapter. I really did. Azami has grown on me. This makes total sense. He was a good villain, and this makes total sense as to why he's not he's a good-natured guy, but in the same way that people get corrupted by the storm and they fall, in the same sense here, Azami too was taken by the storm in an indirect way. He stood outside the storm. He was sitting in his house looking out at the window and watching everyone else weather the storm, pretty much, and he couldn't go out and help. If he went outside, he too would be swallowed up. It was a bystander's guilt sort of idea, and it makes total sense. I really enjoy it, and it makes sense why we wouldn't known about it up until now. We got Mana's introduction like 10 chapters ago. Now 10. How soon do you want this? We don't want super fast pacing. Everyone's been complaining about the pacing, and me too, about this arc. So this makes total sense to me, right? And basically, he says, without an inhuman, and so we get the whole flashback, and Suzanne explains this. And remember, they continuously mention that it started with Saiba, and now, and in the end, I couldn't save a single person, not a single one. I couldn't prevent, the God tongue was the same. Like, people with transcendent cooking abilities would eventually, no matter how powerful they were, would eventually be swallowed up by the storm, because the cooking world demands it. The storm demands it. That you continue to push the limits and push the boundaries, and eventually the storm takes you. So his thing was, I couldn't save anybody, and I did not have an inhuman ability. Without an inhuman ability like Cross-Nines, it's not possible to get to that level anymore. Someone outside of that can't get to that level. And he says, I recognize Soma's strength. Sure, I've recognized it, but he doesn't. Nothing here can fix Mana. Since Anuma said he couldn't do it, once again, I believe Joshiro can do it. I still say that he threw the match. This is all ending up in a way to save Arena, Mana, Azami, his son, both of his sons. Joshiro's got this all planned out, in my opinion. Him and Suzanne have come up with this a long time ago. And maybe that's why he handpicked the 92nd generation. Maybe that's why he handpicked them, which is something that's a plot thread that kind of fell off the wagon. But maybe that's the reasoning. He looked for, this is the time. Arena's in her school. This is the time to finally bring everything to a close and fix everything, And in the end, Joshiro basically said, Azami basically, he's there, but he resigns. And so Arena's heard all this, so now she knows exactly why. He goes, I wanted to give the strict, at the end of the day, at least Arena wouldn't fall like Mana. He watched his wife go through this, and to the point that she became the way she is. He didn't want that for his daughter, so he thought, I'll be the lesser of two evils. He knew what he was doing. Very strict education, what he called it. He justified it. And is it justifiable? Yes and no. You can make the argument, but at the end of the day, it's still his daughter. He didn't want his daughter to end up like his wife, like her mother. He did not want that for his child. So it's one of those he loves her too much, pretty much, to let that happen. He loves her so much, he's willing to be the devil for her, sort of idea, to be her evil, so that the storm doesn't even exist. I like it. I really, really like it, guys. I don't know about you, but it's made me really happy. If only the rest of this arc had such great characterization and moments like this, I would have been way happier. And here at the end, he basically says, the only way to make this work is that, Mana has acknowledged that dish. That hasn't happened for a very long time. cross knives is an inhuman ability, and that's why Mana was searching them out, people with abilities, because abilities are the only way that something totally beyond human limits can reach her now at the point she's at in the storm. And remember, Joshiro was in the storm before Mana, and he was a transcendent chef, so potentially he's just as far or farther, but remember, he found his love of cooking again, so something else, potentially something can happen there. At the end card, he basically says, we got to make him champion. There's no other way because there's no way to do it. And Joshiro basically looks at him and says, oh, so you're sure about that, are you? So that's a great way to end it. I want to see what Joshiro's opinion on this is. I love the storm metaphor. I always have. It's really great. I love the key moments here. Azami, everything. This review has gone way too long for a Shokugeki no Soma review, for one that's not ranting about how much I hated 301 or something like that. So, yeah, this chapter was incredible. I wish that the rest of this arc had chapters like these because they are almost non-existent. Probably one of the best chapters of the arc, if not the best one for me. Really loved it. Hope we get more like this next chapter. I mean, I want to see Soma serve his dish, but I want this conversation to continue. I want more information. I want Mana to talk directly to Azami and stuff. I want to see this stuff. This is what excites me. So what did you guys think of the chapter? What did you think of the review? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Please like, subscribe, comment. As always, it's always really appreciated, guys. And this has been Griever, as always, with your Shokugeki no Soma, Chapter 309 review. We'll see you back here next time. Keep cooking, drink responsibly, and see you later.